The cards slapped against the worn tavern table with a finality that made Yates Drayton's stomach drop. And across from him, the grizzled trader named Halford grinned wide enough to show his missing molars as he reached for the iron-linked chain that bound the orc woman's wrists. She stood behind Halford's chair like a silent shadow, her green skin luminous in the firelight, her amber eyes downcast and unreadable beneath the tangled mass of dark hair that fell past her broad shoulders. And Yates realized with a nauseating lurch that he had just won another human being in a game of cards. He had not meant for this to happen. The evening had started simply enough, with Yates stopping at the frontier tavern called the Copper Bell for a hot meal and a place to sleep, before continuing his journey to the Northern Territories. He had sold his father's farm 3 months prior, after the old man passed, and was heading toward the logging camps where he hoped to find work and a fresh start. The cards had been a distraction, something to pass the time while the mutton stew cooled in his bowl. He had played conservatively, betting only copper coins, until Halford had grown frustrated with the small stakes and offered something more interesting. "I have got cargo that needs offloading," Halford had said, gesturing with his tankard toward the orc woman. "She is strong as an ox, good for labor. One hand, winner takes all." Yates should have refused. He should have gathered his belongings and walked away from the table. But the other men in the tavern had been watching, and his pride had gotten the better of his common sense. He had told himself he would lose anyway, that Halford looked like a man who knew his way around a deck of cards. Except, Yates had drawn 3 queens and a pair of 8s, and Halford's hand had come up short, and now the trader was shoving the chain across the table with a philosophical shrug. "She is yours then," Halford said. "Name is Ragna or something like that. Got her from a raid settlement up north. She does not talk much, but she understands common well enough. Good luck with her." Yates stared at the chain, unable to move. The iron links gleamed dully in the firelight, and he could see where they connected to the heavy manacles around Ragna's wrists. His mouth had gone dry, and his heart hammered against his ribs. Around them, the tavern had gone quiet, every eye fixed on the table. "I do not want her," Yates said finally, his voice coming out hoarse. "Keep your cargo, the game was just for coin." Halford's expression darkened. "A bet is a bet. You cannot refuse your winnings. That is not how this works. I am not in the business of owning people. She is not people, boy. She is an orc." Halford stood, scraping his chair back across the floorboards. "You won her fair and square. If you do not take her, that is an insult to my honor, and we will have a different kind of problem." The other men in the tavern shifted, some moving their hands to the weapons at their belts. Yates felt the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. He was a stranger here, alone, and he understood with sudden clarity that refusing Halford's terms might get him killed, or at the very least badly beaten. These frontier settlements had their own codes, their own ways of handling disputes, and he had already violated some unspoken rule by trying to back out of the wager, his hands shaking slightly. Yates reached across the table and took hold of the chain. The iron was cold against his palm. Behind Halford, Ragna's expression did not change. She simply watched him with those amber eyes, her face carefully blank. Halford grinned again and clapped Yates on the shoulder hard enough to make him wince. "There is a good lad. She will serve you well, long as you keep her fed and do not let her near weapons. They are dangerous when armed, these green skins." Yates wanted to vomit. Instead, he nodded stiffly and gathered the chain, rising from his seat. Ragna moved when he tugged gently on the links, following him with an easy grace that spoke of practice, of having done this many times before. He led her across the tavern toward the stairs, acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. Someone laughed, a sharp bark of sound that made his shoulders tense. He had paid for a room earlier, a small space with a narrow bed and a single window that looked out over the muddy street. When they reached the door, Yates fumbled with the key, his fingers clumsy with nerves. The lock finally gave, and he pushed inside, Ragna following silently behind him. He closed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. In the privacy of the room, he finally got a good look at her. Ragna was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with the powerful build of someone who had spent a lifetime doing hard physical labor. Her arms were corded with muscle, and her shoulders were broad beneath the rough homespun tunic she wore. The fabric was stained and torn in places, revealing glimpses of green skin marked with old scars. Her face was striking in a way he had not expected, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, her tusks small and white against her full lips. Her hair, though tangled, had a slight wave to it, falling in a dark curtain past her shoulders. She stood in the center of the room, her manacled hands clasped before her, and waited. The chain draped from her wrists to where it pooled on the floor, and Yates realized he was still holding his end of it like some kind of leash. He dropped it immediately, the links clattering against the wood. "I am sorry," he said. His voice sounded too loud in the small space. "I did not mean for that to happen. I should not have played that hand. I should not have been at that table at all." Ragna said nothing. She simply watched him with those unreadable amber eyes. Yates ran a hand through his hair, searching for words. "Look, I am not going to hurt you. I do not believe in slavery. I do not believe in owning people, orc or otherwise. This is wrong. All of this is wrong." Still, she remained silent. He wondered if she even understood him or if Halford had lied about that too. "You speak common?" he asked gently. After a long moment, Ragna nodded once. The movement was slight, almost imperceptible. "Will you talk to me?" She shook her head. Her expression had not changed. Yates sighed and moved away from the door, going to the window to stare out at the darkened street below. A light rain had started to fall, pattering against the glass. He could feel Ragna's eyes on his back, tracking his movements. "I cannot let you go tonight," he said quietly. "Halford would know and there would be trouble. But in the morning we will leave this place, and once we are clear of the settlement, I will remove those chains and you can go wherever you want. I give you my word." Behind him, he heard a soft sound, almost like a sigh. When he turned, Ragna had shifted slightly, her head tilted to one side. She studied him for a long moment, and he thought he saw something flicker in her eyes, some emotion he could not quite name. Then she lowered herself to sit on the floor, her back against the wall, and closed her eyes. Yates stood there, uncertain. The bed was right there, but the thought of sleeping in it while she sat on the hard floor made him feel ill. He grabbed the thin blanket from the bed and approached her slowly, as one might approach a skittish animal. When he draped the blanket over her shoulders, she flinched slightly but did not pull away. "I will take the floor," he said. "You can have the bed." Ragna opened her eyes and looked up at him. For the first time her expression shifted, a small crease appearing between her brows. She shook her head firmly. "Please," Yates said. "I insist." She shook her head again, and there was something almost fierce in her gaze. He understood then that she would not take the bed, that perhaps in her mind she was not allowed such comforts, or that accepting it would violate some rule she had been taught. The realization made his chest ache. He retrieved his traveling pack and used it as a pillow, stretching out on the floor a few feet away from where Ragna sat. The boards were hard beneath his back, and the room was cold despite the small fire burning in the hearth. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain and the sound of Ragna's breathing, and wondered how his life had become so complicated in the span of a single evening. Sleep came eventually, though it was fitful and plagued with uneasy dreams. When Yates woke, pale dawn light was filtering through the window, and Ragna was exactly where he had left her, still sitting against the wall with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes were open, and he had the impression she had not slept at all. He sat up slowly, his back protesting after a night on the hard floor. "Good morning," he said. His voice was rough with sleep. Ragna inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Yates stood and stretched, working the kinks out of his muscles. He went to his pack and pulled out a wrapped bundle of bread and dried meat he had purchased the day before. He broke the bread in half and offered one portion to Ragna along with some of the meat. She stared at the food for a long moment before slowly reaching out to take it. Her movements were hesitant, uncertain, as though she expected him to snatch it away at the last second. When he did not, she brought the bread to her mouth and took a small bite, chewing slowly. They ate in silence, the only sound the continued patter of rain against the window. When they finished, Yates packed his belongings and slung the pack over his shoulder. He retrieved the chain from where it lay on the floor, hating the weight of it in his hand. "We need to leave," he said. "I am going to lead you out of the tavern and through the settlement. Once we are outside the boundary, I will remove the chains. You understand?" Ragna nodded. "If anyone stops us or asks questions, just stay quiet and let me handle it. I will get us out of here safely." Another nod. Yates took a breath and opened the door. The tavern's common room was mostly empty at this early hour. Just a few bleary-eyed travelers nursing cups of weak tea and the tavern keeper sweeping the floor. No one paid them much attention as Yates led Ragna down the stairs and toward the door. His heart pounded the entire way, certain that someone would stop them, that Halford would appear and demand to know where they were going. But the door opened easily, and then they were outside in the cold morning air, the rain having diminished to a light mist. Yates walked quickly, keeping his hand loose on the chain, trying not to think about how it must look to any onlookers. Ragna followed without resistance, her steps matching his pace easily despite the manacles. They passed through the muddy streets of the settlement, past the blacksmith shop and the general store and the small chapel with its crooked steeple. A few people watched them go, but no one called out or tried to stop them. The settlement gave way to open country, rolling hills covered in scrub brush and scattered trees. The road, such as it was little more than a dirt track rutted by wagon wheels. Yates kept walking until the buildings were well behind them and they were alone on the empty road. Then he stopped and turned to face Ragna. "Okay," he said, "let me see the manacles." Ragna held out her wrists and Yates examined the heavy iron cuffs. They were locked with a simple mechanism, but he did not have the key. He pulled a knife from his belt, a sturdy blade he had inherited from his father, and worked the tip into the lock. It took several minutes of careful manipulation, his fingers growing numb from the cold and the concentration required, but finally, the first lock gave way with a soft click. The manacle fell open, and Ragna pulled her wrist free. The skin beneath was raw and chafed, marked with old scars from previous bondage. Yates worked on the second lock, and soon both manacles lay in the mud at their feet along with the chain. Ragna stood there, rubbing her wrists gently, staring down at the discarded iron as though unable to believe it was real. "You are free," Yates said. "You can go wherever you want. I am sorry for what happened, for all of it. I hope you can find your way home or to somewhere safe." Ragna lifted her gaze from the chains to his face. For a long moment she simply looked at him, and he saw the walls behind her eyes begin to crack, saw something vulnerable and raw peek through. Then, to his utter shock, she spoke. "Why?" Her voice was low and rough as though from disuse, but the word was clear. "Why what?" Yates asked. Why free me? He blinked, surprised by the question. Because it is the right thing to do, because I do not believe anyone should be owned or enslaved. Because you are a person and you deserve to be free. I am an orc. I do not care what you are still a person. Ragna's expression shifted, a complicated mix of emotions flickering across her face. She looked away, staring out at the empty road ahead of them, then back at the settlement behind them, then finally at Yates again. Where will you go? She asked. North, he said. To the logging camps. I need to find work. And I should go east, back to the mountains. Back to what remains of my clan. Is that what you want? She was quiet for a long time, the silence stretching between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I do not know what I want anymore. I have not had the luxury of wants for a very long time. Yates felt something tighten in his chest. How long were you with Halford? 3 months. Before him, another trader. Before that, a farmer who worked me in his fields until I collapsed. Before that. She trailed off, shaking her head. It does not matter. 2 years in total. 2 years since the raids, since my clan was scattered. I am sorry, Yates said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. That should never have happened to you. Ragna's jaw tightened, and he saw her tusks flash as she pressed her lips together. You are a strange human, Yates Drayton. Most of your kind would have kept me, used me. You are the first who has shown me kindness. Then most of my kind are fools and cowards. She laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no real humor. Perhaps. They stood there on the road, the mist settling over them like a veil, and Yates found himself reluctant to say goodbye. There was something about Ragna, something in the way she carried herself despite everything she had endured that called to him. He recognized a kindred spirit, someone who had lost everything and was trying to find their way forward. Come with me, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could think them through. Ragna's eyes widened. What? Come with me. To the logging camps or wherever I end up. Not as a slave or a servant, but as a traveling companion, someone to share the road with. It is dangerous to travel alone, and you said you do not know what you want. Maybe some time to figure that out would help. You do not owe me anything. You have already given me my freedom. I know I do not owe you anything. I am not asking out of obligation. I am asking because I would like your company, because I think you are brave and strong, and those are qualities I admire, because the road is long and lonely, and I would rather walk it with a friend than alone. She stared at him, and he could see the conflict playing across her face. Part of her wanted to accept, he could tell, but another part held back, wary and uncertain. You would be seen with me, she asked, knowing how humans treat orcs, knowing the prejudice we would face. I do not care what others think. Let them stare, let them whisper. It does not change anything. You say that now, but you do not know what it is like. The hatred, the violence. Humans have killed orcs for less than walking beside them on a road. Then we will be careful. We will avoid trouble where we can. But Ragna, you just spent 2 years in chains and now you are free. Do not let fear put you right back in them. Live. Choose what you want, not what is safest or easiest. His words hung in the air between them. Ragna closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and when she opened them again, something had changed. There was a determination there, a spark of defiance. I will come with you, she said. But not because I need protection or charity. I will come as an equal. I will earn my keep. And if you change your mind, if you regret this offer, you will tell me honestly, and I will leave without argument. Agreed, Yates said, feeling a smile tug at his lips. As equals, as companions. Ragna nodded, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw the ghost of a smile touch her own lips. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges and revealing the person beneath the armor she wore. They left the discarded chains where they lay in the mud and set off together down the road, heading north toward whatever future awaited them. The first few days of their journey together were marked by a careful distance. Ragna kept her own counsel, speaking only when necessary, and Yates did not push her. He understood that trust would take time, that the wound she carried went deeper than the scars on her skin. They fell into a rhythm, walking during the daylight hours and making camp each evening in sheltered spots off the main road. Yates discovered that Ragna was remarkably capable. She knew how to build a fire that produced minimal smoke, how to identify which plants were safe to eat, and how to move through the forest without making a sound. When he commented on her skills, she simply shrugged. "My clan taught me to hunt and track before I had seen 6 summers," she said. "These things do not leave you, even after years in chains." They avoided settlements as much as possible, purchasing supplies from isolated farmsteads where the residents were too surprised or too nervous to ask many questions. Yates paid fair prices and made no trouble, and most were content to take his coin and let them move on. Once, they encountered a patrol of militia on the road, and Yates felt his heart nearly stop when the men demanded to know what business he had traveling with an orc. He had claimed she was his guide, hired to help him navigate the wilderness, and the lie had been thin enough to see through. But the men had been more interested in continuing their patrol than causing trouble, and they had been allowed to pass with only dark looks and muttered warnings. That evening, as they sat around their campfire, Ragna spoke quietly. "You do not have to keep doing this, defending me, lying for me. I can disappear into the forest. You would be safer without me." "I do not want to be safer without you," Yates said firmly. "I want you here. I told you that when I asked you to come." "But why?" The question burst from her with surprising force. "Why would you tie yourself to someone who only brings you trouble? What do you gain from this?" Yates considered his answer carefully. "When my father died, I felt like I had nothing left. The farm was gone, my family was gone, and I was just drifting. I had no purpose, no direction. But traveling with you these past days, having someone to talk to, someone to share the journey with, it has made me feel less alone, less lost. That is what I gain, your company. Your friendship, if you will give it." Ragna was quiet, the firelight casting dancing shadows across her green skin. "I am not good at friendship. I do not know how to be what you need. You do not have to be anything except yourself. That is enough." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he held her gaze steadily. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Ragna's shoulders relaxed slightly, and she nodded. "Then I will try," she said, "to be a friend. Though I warn you, I am out of practice." Yates smiled. "So am I. We can figure it out together." As the days turned into weeks, the distance between them gradually closed. Ragna began to speak more freely, sharing stories of her childhood in the mountain clan, of the traditions and customs of orc society. She told him about the hunting parties that would venture into the deep forests, about the festivals that celebrated the turning of seasons, about the intricate songs her people would sing to honor their ancestors. Her voice grew animated as she spoke, her hands gesturing to illustrate her points, and Yates found himself captivated by the world she described. In turn, he told her about his life on the farm, about his father's quiet strength and his mother's love of flowers. He spoke of the long hours working the fields, the satisfaction of bringing in a good harvest, the way the wheat would turn golden in the late summer sun. He told her about the books his mother had taught him to read, and the dreams he had once harbored of seeing more of the world. They laughed together, sometimes at shared jokes and sometimes at the absurdity of their situation. Two outcasts walking the back roads of the frontier, neither of them quite belonging anywhere, yet somehow belonging with each other. One evening, as they made camp beside a swift-moving stream, Ragna asked him about the card game. "Do you regret it?" she said. "Winning me?" Yates paused in the act of laying out his bedroll. "I regret that the game happened at all. I regret that you were treated as property, as something to be wagered. But do I regret that it led to us traveling together? No, I do not regret that. Even though it has made your life harder, even then, some things are worth the difficulty." Ragna was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What will you do when we reach the logging camps? Find work, I suppose, save money, maybe eventually buy a piece of land somewhere, start a small homestead. And what about me? Where do I fit in these plans?" It was a fair question, and Yates realized he had been avoiding thinking about it. The truth was, he could not imagine reaching the camps and simply parting ways with Ragna. Over the course of their journey, she had become important to him in ways he was only beginning to understand. "I hope you will stay," he said honestly. "Not because you owe me anything, but because I want you to. Whatever I build, wherever I end up, there would be a place for you in it, if you wanted." Ragna's expression was unreadable in the fading light. "You are offering me a home. I am offering you a choice. You can come with me and we can figure out what comes next together, or you can return to your clan, or you can go anywhere else you choose. The decision is yours, and I will support whatever you decide." She turned away from him, facing the stream, and he saw her shoulders tense. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "You do not know what you are offering. If I stay with you, if we continue on together, people will talk. They will assume things. They will make your life miserable. Let them. You say that now, but when it is your livelihood at stake, when it is your reputation and your future, you may feel differently." Yates moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "Ragna, look at me." She turned, and he saw the shine of unshed tears in her amber eyes. "I know what I am offering," he said gently, "and I know what it might cost. But I also know that walking away from you, pretending the last few weeks did not matter, would cost me more. You have become my friend. You have become someone I care about. That is not something I am willing to give up because of other people's prejudices." A single tear escaped, tracking down her cheek, and Yates reached up without thinking to brush it away. Her skin was warm beneath his fingertips, and he felt her breath catch. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them was quite ready to name. "I will stay," Ragna whispered. "For now I will stay." Yates smiled, relief flooding through him. "Good, I am glad." They stood there by the stream as the last light faded from the sky, and Yates felt something shift between them, something that went beyond friendship and hinted at deeper, more complicated feelings. They reached the logging camps 3 weeks after leaving the settlement where Yates had won his fateful card game. The camps were a sprawling collection of rough cabins and work yards carved out of the dense northern forest. Men moved between the buildings like ants, hauling logs and operating saws, their voices rising in rough work songs that echoed through the trees. Yates found the foreman in a building that served as both office and bunkhouse. The man was grizzled and broad, with hands like clubs and eyes that assessed Yates with practiced efficiency. "You looking for work?" the foreman asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Yes, sir. I can handle an axe and I am not afraid of hard labor." "Good. We need men." "Pay is 2 silver a week plus room and board. Work starts at dawn and ends at dusk. No drinking on the job, no fighting, no stealing. Break the rules and you are out. Understood?" "Understood." The foreman's gaze shifted past Yates to where Ragna waited outside, clearly visible through the open door. His expression hardened. "That your orc?" Yates bristled at the possessive language but kept his voice even. She is my traveling companion. We do not allow orcs in the camps. Too much trouble, she will have to go. Then I will go with her. Thank you for your time. Yates turned to leave, but the foreman called out, Wait, hold on now, you are serious. You would walk away from good-paying work over an orc? Yes. The foreman studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You are either crazy or noble, and I am not sure which is worse. Look, I need workers badly. We are behind on our quota and winter is coming. If she stays out of the way and does not cause problems, I suppose I can look the other way. But any trouble, any at all, and you both leave. Clear? Yates felt a surge of gratitude. Crystal clear, thank you. Do not thank me yet. The men are not going to like it. Keep her close and watch your back. The foreman assigned them a small cabin at the edge of the camp, a single-room structure with a dirt floor and a leaking roof. It was not much, but it was shelter, and after weeks of sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury. They moved their meager belongings inside, and Yates reported for his first day of work the following morning. The work was brutal. Yates spent 12 hours a day felling trees, his muscles screaming in protest, his hands blistering and bleeding despite the leather gloves he wore. The other men kept their distance, shooting dark looks in his direction whenever they thought he was not watching. At meals, he ate alone, the only sound the scrape of his spoon against his bowl. Ragna, meanwhile, spent her days in and around their cabin. She hunted in the surrounding forest, bringing back rabbits and wild fowl that she cleaned and cooked over their small fire. She mended their clothes, reinforced the cabin's weak points, and generally made their living space more habitable. She also kept herself scarce when the other workers were about, understanding without being told that her presence was tolerated but not welcomed. 2 weeks into their stay, trouble found them. Yates was returning from the workyard one evening, exhausted and covered in sawdust, when he found 3 men standing outside their cabin. Ragna was backed against the wall, her posture defensive, while the men jeered and taunted her. Look at the green skin trying to play house, one of them said, his words slurred with drink. What is a monster like you doing in a human camp? Bet she is warming his bed, another man added with a nasty laugh. That is all orcs are good for, right? Rutting like animals. Rage flooded through Yates, hot and immediate. He strode forward, putting himself between Ragna and the men. Get away from her. The first man, a heavy-set logger named Garrett, sneered. Or what? You going to fight us over your pet monster? Leave, now, or we will find out. Garrett took a step closer, his fists clenching. You think you are special, walking around here like you are better than us because you keep an orc. You are pathetic. I think you are drunk and stupid, and if you take one more step, you are going to regret it. For a tense moment, Yates thought it would come to blows. Then the cabin door behind them opened and the foreman stepped out. Yates had not realized the man was nearby, but his presence changed the entire dynamic. The 3 loggers immediately straightened, their belligerence evaporating. You 3 have somewhere else to be, the foreman said quietly. There was steel in his voice. We were just talking, Garrett muttered. Then go talk somewhere else. Now. The men shuffled away, casting resentful glances over their shoulders. The foreman watched them go, then turned to Yates and Ragna. I told you to keep out of trouble, he said. They came to us, Yates replied. We were not looking for a fight. Maybe not, but you found one anyway. Look, I am going to be straight with you. The men do not like having an orc here. They think it is bad luck. Some of them lost family to orc raids, and seeing her every day opens old wounds. I do not know how much longer I can keep the peace. What are you saying? I am saying you might want to consider moving on. Find another camp, another settlement. Somewhere the history is not so fresh. Yates felt his heart sink. We just got here. I have barely earned enough to cover supplies. I know, and I am sorry, but I am trying to prevent something worse from happening. These are good men, most of them, but they are angry and scared, and people do stupid things when they are angry and scared." The foreman left, and Yates turned to Ragna. She had been silent through the entire exchange, but now she spoke, her voice resigned. "He is right. We should leave." "No. Yates, this is not sustainable. Everywhere we go, it will be the same. Humans and orcs do not mix. It is the way of the world. Then the world is wrong, and I refuse to accept it." "Your refusal does not change reality. Those men tonight, they wanted to hurt me." "Maybe they wanted to hurt you too. How long before words turn to violence? How long before someone gets seriously injured or killed? I will not let them hurt you. You cannot protect me from everyone, and I will not be the reason you get hurt. I care about you too much for that." The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable. Yates stared at her, seeing the fear and pain in her eyes, and felt his own carefully controlled emotions surge to the surface. "You care about me?" he asked softly. Ragna looked away. "I should not. It is foolish and dangerous, but yes. I care about you. You are the first person in years to treat me like I matter, the first person to see me as more than a tool or a monster. How could I not care, Ragna?" He stepped closer, reaching out to gently turn her face back toward him. "I care about you too, more than I should, probably. More than is wise, but I do. Then you understand why I have to leave, why staying here, staying with you, will only bring pain. No, what I understand is that I am tired of running, tired of letting fear dictate my choices. I want to build something, Ragna. I want to find a place where we can both belong. And if that place does not exist, then I want to create it, with you, if you are willing." She searched his face, and he saw the war raging behind her eyes, hope battling with despair, longing battling with resignation. "What if we fail?" She whispered. "What if we try and it all falls apart? Then at least we tried. At least we fought for something better, but I do not think we will fail. I think if we are smart and careful and support each other, we can make this work." Ragna closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, he saw the decision there. "Okay, we stay, we fight. But Yates, if it becomes too dangerous, if the cost becomes too high, promise me you will reconsider." "I promise, but I do not think it will come to that." He hoped he was right. The next few weeks were tense. Yates worked harder than ever, determined to prove his worth to the foreman and the other loggers. He volunteered for the worst jobs, stayed late when others left early, and never complained. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the men began to soften. Not Garrett and his friends, who remained openly hostile, but others who saw his dedication and began to respect it. Ragna, for her part, found ways to make herself useful to the camp. She began leaving game at the cookhouse door, anonymous contributions that helped stretch the camp's food supplies. She repaired equipment that had been left to rust in the yard, her strong hands making quick work of broken axe handles and bent saw blades. She never sought credit or acknowledgement, but people noticed nonetheless. One morning, Yates woke to find Ragna already up, standing in the doorway of their cabin and staring out at the forest. There was something different about her posture, a tension he had not seen before. "What is wrong?" he asked, pulling on his boots. "I heard something last night." Voices in the forest, orc voices. Yates was instantly alert. "Are you sure?" "Yes. They were far away, but I know the sound of my people's language. There is a group moving through the area. Could it be your clan, maybe, or raiders, or another group displaced by the human settlements?" "I do not know. Do you want to go find out?" Ragna turned to look at him. "Would you come with me?" "Of course." They set out after Yates finished his work for the day, heading into the dense forest in the direction Ragna indicated. She moved through the trees like a ghost, her trained senses alert for any sign of danger. Yates followed as quietly as he could, trusting her to lead them true. They walked for over an hour before Ragna stopped suddenly, her hand shooting out to grab Yates' arm. She pointed ahead, and he saw what had caught her attention. Through the trees, a small camp was visible. 4 orcs sat around a fire, their broad shoulders and green skin unmistakable in the fading light. "Wait here," Ragna whispered. "Let me approach them first. Are you sure? They will be less threatened by me alone. If they see a human, they might attack." Yates wanted to argue, but he recognized the wisdom in her words. He nodded and watched as Ragna stepped out from the cover of the trees and approached the camp. The orcs spotted her immediately, rising to their feet in defensive postures. One of them called out something in the guttural language of their people, and Ragnar responded in kind. From his hidden position, Yates could not understand the words, but he could read the body language. Initial tension gave way to surprise, then cautious welcome. Ragna gestured back toward where he was hidden, and after a moment of apparent debate, she turned and beckoned him forward. Yates emerged from the trees slowly, his hands visible and empty. The orcs watched him approach with undisguised suspicion, but they did not attack. Ragna spoke to them again, her tone urgent and explanatory. One of the orcs, an older female with scars crossing her face, responded with what sounded like questions. Ragna answered, pointing to Yates, then to herself, then back to the direction of the logging camp. The conversation went on for several minutes, and Yates stood there feeling useless and exposed. Finally, Ragna turned back to him. "This is a scouting party from the Iron Ridge clan," she said. "They are looking for safe territory to settle. I told them about the logging camp and the tensions there. Thura here," she indicated the scarred female, "says that humans and orcs cannot live peacefully together, that we are fools to try." "What do you think?" Yates asked. Ragna looked at him, then back at the orcs, then at the ground. "I think maybe she is right. Maybe we are fools. But if we do not try, if we just accept that we will always be enemies, then there is no hope for any of us." Thura spoke again, her tone sharp, and Ragnar replied with equal force. The 2 orc women argued back and forth for a moment before Thura laughed, a harsh bark of sound. She said something that made Ragna stiffen, then turned and began packing up the camp. The other orcs followed suit, and within minutes, they were gone, disappearing into the forest as silently as they had come. "What did she say?" Yates asked as he and Ragna made their way back to the logging camp. "She said that I had been among humans too long, that I had forgotten what it means to be an orc. She said that I had chosen shame and servitude over pride and freedom." "That is not true. You are not ashamed, and you are certainly not a servant. Am I not? I hide in our cabin while you work. I skulk in the shadows so as not to offend the humans. I make myself small and quiet and forgettable. What is that if not a form of servitude? It is survival. It is being smart and careful. There is no shame in that." Ragna stopped walking and turned to face him. "I am tired of surviving, Yates. I want to live, truly live, but I do not know how to do that in a world that sees me as a monster." Yates reached out and took her hands in his, marveling at how her larger, calloused palms felt against his own. "Then we will figure it out together. We will find a way, I promise." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "Why do you care so much? What am I to you, really?" It was the question he had been avoiding, the truth he had not wanted to examine too closely. But standing there in the forest with her hands in his and her amber eyes searching his face, he could not hide from it any longer. "You are everything," he said simply. "You are my friend and my companion and the person I think about when I wake up and the last person I want to see before I sleep. You are brave and strong and kind despite everything you have suffered. You make me want to be better to do better. I care about you because you are you, and that is enough." Ragna's breath hitched, and he saw tears well in her eyes. "Yates, I am an orc. You are human. Even if we wanted more than friendship, the world would never allow it. I do not care what the world allows. I care what we want. And if you are asking if I want more than friendship, then yes, I do. I want everything with you if you will have me." The tears spilled over, tracking down her green cheeks, and Yates reached up to wipe them away just as he had weeks ago by the stream. But this time, Ragna leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I want that too," she whispered. "More than I should, more than is safe. But Yates, I am scared. Scared of what will happen if people find out. Scared of the consequences. Then we will be scared together. But we will also be together, and that is what matters." Ragna opened her eyes and looked at him with such raw vulnerability that it made his chest ache. Then, slowly, carefully, she leaned down and pressed her forehead to his. It was not quite a kiss, but it was intimate in a way that took his breath away. He felt the warmth of her skin, smelled the faint scent of pine and wood smoke that clung to her, and knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. They stood like that for a long moment, the forest quiet around them, and Yates felt something fundamental shift inside him. This was not just attraction or friendship or even love, though it encompassed all those things. This was a choice, a commitment to stand together against whatever the world threw at them. It was terrifying and exhilarating and utterly right. When they finally pulled apart, Ragna was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that transformed her entire face. "Okay," she said, "together, no matter what comes." "No matter what comes," Yates agreed. They walked back to the camp hand in hand, and if any of the workers saw them, they did not comment. That night, as they lay in their respective bedrolls in the small cabin, Yates listened to Ragna's breathing and felt a contentment he had not known since before his father's death. The future was still uncertain, the obstacles still daunting, but for the first time in a long time, he felt genuinely hopeful. The winter came early that year, sweeping down from the northern mountains with brutal efficiency. The logging camp slowed its operations as snow piled high in the work yards and temperatures plummeted. Yates found himself with more free time, and he used it to spend long hours talking with Ragna, learning more about her past and sharing more of his own. She told him about her family, her mother who had been a healer and her father who had served as a warrior for their clan. She spoke of her younger brother, lost in the same raid that had scattered her people. The grief was evident in every word, and Yates held her as she cried. Offering what comfort he could in turn, he told her about his own losses, about the loneliness of watching his father fade and the weight of responsibility that had pressed down on his shoulders. They shared their fears and their dreams, building a foundation of trust and understanding that went deeper than anything Yates had experienced before. As the weeks passed, their relationship evolved. They went from carefully maintaining separate spaces to falling asleep close together, seeking warmth in the frigid cabin. They went from formal conversations to easy banter and comfortable silences. They went from occasional touches to constant small points of contact, a hand on a shoulder, a brush of fingers, a shared smile across the room. The other workers noticed, of course. Some whispered and stared with disgust. Others simply shook their heads, dismissing Yates as a lost cause. But a few, a small handful, began to soften. There was a young logger named Finn who started leaving extra firewood outside their cabin door. There was the cook, a grizzled man named Marcus, who made sure Yates and Ragna always got generous portions at meals. There was even old Tobias, who had lost a son to an orc raid years ago, who stopped Yates one day and said simply, "She seems decent. Treat her well." It was not universal acceptance, not by a long stretch, but it was something, a crack in the wall of prejudice. One particularly harsh evening, with the wind howling outside and snow piling against the cabin walls, Ragna turned to Yates with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what comes next. We cannot stay here forever. The camp is temporary, and even if it were not, we would never truly be welcome." "I have been thinking the same thing," Yates admitted. "I have saved almost enough to buy a small piece of land, somewhere remote, away from settlements. We could build a homestead, be self-sufficient." "A home," Ragna said softly, as though testing the word. "It has been so long since I had a real home. We could make it whatever we wanted. A farm, a trading post, a hunting lodge, whatever felt right. And we would be there together, as partners, as equals." Ragna was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When she spoke, her voice was tentative, almost shy. "Among my people, when two individuals decide to share their lives, there is a bonding ceremony. It is not quite like human marriage, but similar. They exchange vows before the clan elders and pledge to support each other through all hardships." Yates' heart began to race. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I want to build this life with you, not as a companion or a friend, though you are both those things. I want to be your partner in truth. I want to share your burdens and your joys. I want to wake up beside you and fall asleep knowing you are near, if you want that too." Yates crossed the small space between them and took her hands in his. "Ragna, I want that more than anything. I may not know your people's customs, but I can make you a promise here and now. I promise to stand with you through whatever comes. I promise to protect you and support you and honor you. I promise that you will always have a home with me, always have a place where you belong. I love you." Ragna's eyes widened at the declaration. "You love me, with everything I am. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you smile when you think no one is watching. I love how you hum while you cook, and how you know the name of every plant in the forest. I love you, Ragna, all of you, and I want to spend my life showing you that." She surged forward and kissed him, a fierce, desperate kiss that tasted of salt and smoke and promise. Yates wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, marveling at how perfectly they fit together despite their differences. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ragna was crying again, but these were tears of joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could. I did not think I was allowed to, but I do. I love you, Yates Drayton, and I want to build a life with you. Then we will. We will leave when spring comes and find our place in the world, together." They held each other as the wind howled outside, and Yates felt a peace settle over him. The path ahead would not be easy. There would be hardships and setbacks and people who would try to tear them apart, but he was not afraid anymore. With Ragna by his side, he felt capable of anything. Winter slowly gave way to early spring, and Yates prepared to leave the logging camp. He had saved enough money to purchase supplies and a small plot of land the foreman had told him about, located 2 days' ride to the northeast. It was rough country, heavily forested and far from any settlement, but it had a freshwater stream and good soil, perfect for a new beginning. On their last day at the camp, the foreman called Yates to his office. Ragna waited outside while the two men talked. "I want you to know, you did good work here," the foreman said. "Best worker I had this season. If circumstances were different, I would ask you to stay on. Thank you. That means a lot. I also want to say I was wrong about her, about your orc. She is a good woman as far as I can tell, takes courage to love someone the world tells you not to. I respect that." Yates felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I appreciate you saying that. Take care of each other out there. It is a hard world, especially for folks like you two. But if anyone can make it work, I think you can." They shook hands, and Yates left the office to find Ragna waiting with their packed belongings. Several of the loggers had gathered to see them off, including Finn and Marcus and even old Tobias. Garrett and his friends were notably absent, which suited Yates just fine. "Safe travels," Marcus said, handing them a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Extra provisions for the road." "Thank you," Ragna said, her voice warm. "For everything." They set off on foot, following the rough trails northeast. The journey took 3 days, longer than expected due to the muddy conditions left by the melting snow. But eventually they crested a hill and looked down at their new home. The land was exactly as the foreman had described it. A small valley nestled between forested hills, with a stream cutting through the center and a meadow that would be perfect for planting. There was an old cabin already on the property, barely more than a shack, but it had 4 walls and a roof, and it was theirs. Yates turned to Ragna, taking in her expression of wonder. "What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," she said. "I think it is home." They spent the next several weeks working to make the cabin livable. Yates repaired the roof while Ragnar reinforced the walls and built a proper hearth. They cleared land for a vegetable garden, constructed a small barn for the animals they planned to acquire, and dug a root cellar for storage. The work was exhausting, but it was also deeply satisfying. Each improvement was a testament to their commitment, a physical representation of the life they were building together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the hills, Ragna spoke thoughtfully. "Do you ever regret it, choosing this life, choosing me?" Yates did not hesitate. "Never, not for a single moment, even though it means isolation. Even though we may never be accepted by either your people or mine, even then. Ragna, being with you has made me happier than I ever thought possible. This place, what we are building here, it is more than I ever dreamed of having. I have no regrets." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good, neither do I." As spring turned to summer, their homestead flourished. The garden produced an abundance of vegetables. The forest provided game, and the stream ran clear and cold. They established a routine, dividing the work equitably and supporting each other through the inevitable challenges. When a bear threatened their small chicken coop, they worked together to drive it off. When Yates injured his hand while chopping wood, Ragna tended to him with herbs and poultices she made from memory of her mother's teachings. When Ragna woke from nightmares of her time in captivity, Yates held her and whispered reassurances until she calmed. They were partners in every sense of the word, and their love deepened with each passing day. One warm summer evening, Yates broached a subject he had been considering for weeks. "I want to do something official, to acknowledge our commitment to each other." Ragna looked at him curiously. "What do you mean? You told me about the bonding ceremony your people use. I would like to do something similar." "Not exactly the same, since we do not have elders to witness it, but something meaningful. Some way to formally pledge ourselves to each other. Like a human marriage. If you want to think of it that way, yes. I know we cannot go to a town and have a proper ceremony. No priest would agree to marry us, but we could create our own ritual, something that honors both our traditions." Ragna's eyes grew bright with emotion. "You would do that? Create a ceremony just for us, of course. Ragna, you are my partner, my love, my everything. I want to honor that in a meaningful way." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Then yes, let us do it. Let us create our own bonding." They spent days preparing. Yates carved a small wooden token, a circular piece etched with symbols representing their journey together. Ragna wove a cord from fibers she gathered in the forest, dyeing it with natural colors. They chose a spot by the stream, beneath an old oak tree that seemed to stand as a guardian over the land. On the evening of the summer solstice, as the last light faded from the sky, They stood together beneath the oak. There were no witnesses except the forest itself, no officiant except their own hearts. But as they exchanged their vows, speaking words of love and commitment and promise, Yates felt the weight and truth of it sink deep into his bones. I, Yates Drayton, pledge myself to you, Ragna. I promise to stand with you through all hardships, to support you in all endeavors, to honor your strength and cherish your heart. I promise to be your partner, your protector, and your home. From this day until my last breath, I am yours. Ragna's voice was steady as she replied, though tears streamed down her face. I, Ragna of the Iron Ridge clan, pledge myself to you, Yates. I promise to share my strength with you, to offer my wisdom when you need guidance, to fight for our life together with everything I am. I promise to be your partner, your companion, and your heart. From this day until the stars fall from the sky, I am yours. Yates tied the woven cord around their joined wrists, binding them together symbolically. Then he gave her the wooden token, and she gave him one she had carved as well, a smooth stone etched with the symbols of her clan. They kissed beneath the oak as the first stars appeared overhead, and Yates felt a completeness he had never known was possible. They were married now, in every way that mattered, not by law or convention, but by choice and love and the promises they had made. It was enough. It was everything. Summer faded into autumn, and their first harvest was successful beyond their hopes. They traded some of their surplus with a traveling merchant who passed through, asking no questions and offering fair prices. The merchant spread word of a homestead in the northeastern forests where goods could be acquired, and over the following months, a few other traders made the journey. Some were surprised to find a human and an orc living together, but most were pragmatic enough to care more about the quality of the goods than the personal lives of the sellers. Yates and Ragna built a reputation for fairness and quality. Their vegetable preserves were particularly prized, as was the smoked game Ragna prepared using techniques from her clan. Slowly, cautiously, they began to establish connections with the wider world while maintaining the security and privacy of their remote homestead. One crisp October morning, a visitor arrived who was different from the usual traders. Yates was working in the garden when he heard the sound of hoofbeats on the trail. He looked up to see a young woman riding toward the homestead, her posture tense and wary. She dismounted as she reached the cleared area around the cabin, her hand resting on the knife at her belt. Ragna emerged from the cabin, and the young woman's eyes widened at the sight of her. "I am looking for Yates Drayton," the woman said, her voice carefully neutral. "I am Yates," he replied, stepping forward. "How can I help you?" The woman studied him for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "My name is Sarah. I run a small settlement about 3 days west of here. We have heard stories about your homestead. About a human and an orc living together peacefully." "Stories get exaggerated," Yates said carefully. "Maybe, but I am hoping they are true. We have a situation and I think you might be able to help." Yates and Ragna exchanged glances. "What kind of situation?" "We have been having problems with a group of orcs raiding our livestock. We have tried everything to stop them, including violence, but it only makes things worse. People on both sides have been hurt. I am tired of the bloodshed. I thought maybe, if what I heard about you two is true, you might be able to serve as intermediaries, help us negotiate a peace." Ragna stepped forward. "Why would you want peace with orcs? Most humans would rather see us wiped out." "Because I am tired of watching people die. Because my settlement includes families with children, and I want them to grow up in a world where humans and orcs are not always at war. Because maybe, just maybe, there is a better way." Sarah looked between them. "Will you help?" Yates wanted to refuse. They had built a good life here, a safe life, and getting involved in conflicts between settlements and orc clans could threaten that. But he also remembered the words he had spoken to Ragna months ago about fighting for something better, about not letting fear dictate their choices. He looked at Ragna and she gave him a small nod. "We will help," he said. "When do you need us?" Sarah's shoulders sagged with relief. "As soon as possible. I can wait while you gather supplies, then we can leave this afternoon." They packed quickly, leaving the homestead secure and taking only what they needed for travel. The journey to Sarah's settlement took 4 days through rough terrain. During the trip, Sarah explained the situation in more detail. The Orc clan, a small group calling themselves the Stone Speakers, had been displaced from their traditional hunting grounds by human expansion. They were starving and desperate, which had led to the raids. Several people on both sides had been killed in skirmishes, and tensions were at a breaking point. When they arrived at the settlement, a small collection of cabins and farms similar to the logging camp, Yates and Ragna were met with mixed reactions. Some people welcomed them warily, grateful for any chance at peace. Others were openly hostile, particularly those who had lost loved ones to the raids. Sarah arranged a meeting in the center of the settlement, and Yates stood before the gathered residents with Ragna at his side. He spoke from the heart, sharing their own story and arguing for understanding and compromise over continued violence. Some listened, moved by his words. Others shouted insults and accusations. The real challenge came when they traveled into the forest to meet with the Stone Speakers. Ragna took the lead, using her knowledge of orc customs to approach the clan respectfully. The initial meeting was tense, with warriors on both sides ready for violence at the slightest provocation. But Ragna spoke passionately in the orc language, explaining who they were and why they had come. Slowly, the Stone Speakers agreed to hear them out. The negotiations took weeks. Yates and Ragna served as translators and mediators, helping both sides understand the other's needs and concerns. It was frustrating work, with progress measured in inches rather than miles. There were moments when it seemed like the whole effort would collapse into violence. But gradually, painfully, a compromise emerged. The settlement agreed to grant the Stone Speakers access to a portion of the forest for hunting, in exchange for the orcs leaving their livestock alone and providing protection against bandits and wildlife. It was not perfect, and there were people on both sides who were unhappy with the agreement. But it was a start, a foundation for something better. On the day the agreement was formalized with representatives from both sides signing a written accord, Sarah pulled Yates aside. "Thank you," she said simply. "You and Ragna gave us hope that another way was possible. I do not know if this peace will last, but at least now we have a chance." "Just treat each other with respect," Yates replied. "Remember that orcs are people too, with families and dreams and fears just like humans. If you can hold on to that, you will be fine." He and Ragna left the settlement a few days later, eager to return to their homestead. The journey had been exhausting and emotionally draining, but it had also been important. They had proven, if only to themselves, that humans and orcs could work together. That peace was possible. When they finally crested the hill overlooking their valley, Yates felt a surge of relief and joy. The cabin stood exactly as they had left it. The garden had survived their absence with minimal weeds, and the stream sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. It was home, truly and completely. That night, as they lay together in their bed, Ragna traced idle patterns on Yates' chest. "You think we made a difference?" she asked. "I know we did. Maybe not a huge difference, maybe not enough to change the whole world, but we gave those people a chance. That is something. I never thought I would be a peacemaker. I was trained as a warrior, taught that strength came from conquest. But standing between those groups, helping them find common ground, that felt like a different kind of strength. It was. It took more courage than any battle. Ragna was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to do more of it. I want to help other settlements and clans find peace. Not constantly, not so much that we sacrifice our own happiness, but when we can, when we are needed." Yates smiled and pulled her closer. "Then that is what we will do. Together." Over the next several years, their homestead became known throughout the region as a place of neutrality and wisdom. Other settlements facing conflicts with orc clans sought their help, and Yates and Ragna built a reputation as fair and effective mediators. They also opened their home to those who needed sanctuary, providing shelter to orcs fleeing persecution and humans seeking to escape violence. Their lives were not without challenges. There were still people who hated them for their relationship, who saw them as traitors or abominations. They faced threats and harassment, and more than once had to defend their home against those who wished them harm. But they also found allies and friends, building a network of people who believed in the possibility of coexistence. Ragnar reconnected with members of her old clan, including some who had been part of the scouting party they had met years ago. The reunion was emotional and complicated, with some clan members embracing her and others shunning her for her choice to live with a human. But over time, bridges were built and relationships were mended. Yates, meanwhile, received word that his distant cousin had passed and left him a small inheritance. It was not much, but it was enough to expand their homestead and purchase some livestock. They acquired chickens and goats, and later a pair of horses that made travel easier. One spring morning, 5 years after they had exchanged vows beneath the oak tree, Ragna came to Yates with news that took his breath away. "I am with child," she said, her expression a mix of joy and fear. Yates pulled her into his arms, his heart swelling with emotions too large to name. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I have known for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain before I told you. This is amazing. This is wonderful. We are going to be parents. Are you not afraid?" "A child of mixed heritage, human and orc, the world will not be kind to them." "The world is not kind to anyone different, but that child will be ours, created from our love, and we will teach them to be strong and compassionate and brave. We will give them the best life we can." Ragna's eyes filled with tears. "I hope I can be a good mother. I do not have any examples to follow. My own mother died when I was young." "You will be an amazing mother. I have no doubts about that. The pregnancy was not easy." Ragna suffered from sickness and exhaustion, and there were moments when they both feared for her health and the child's. But Ragna was strong, and with Yates' support and care, she made it through. On a cold winter night, with snow falling softly outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, Ragna gave birth to a daughter. The labor was long and difficult, and Yates felt helpless as he watched her struggle. But finally, in the early hours before dawn, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Their daughter was perfect. She had her mother's green-tinted skin, though lighter than full-blooded orcs, and her father's blue eyes. Her ears were slightly pointed, and she had tiny nubs where tusks would eventually grow. She was small and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. "What should we name her?" Ragna asked, cradling the infant against her chest. Yates thought for a moment. "What about Alara? It was my mother's name." "Alara," Ragnar repeated softly. "I like it. Yates Drayton." "Yates Drayton," Yates agreed, reaching out to gently stroke his daughter's soft hair. "Welcome to the world, little one. We promise to love you and protect you and teach you to be strong." Raising Alara brought new challenges and new joys. She was a curious, energetic child who inherited her mother's strength and her father's stubborn determination. As she grew, it became clear that she would face difficulties, because of her mixed heritage. But Yates and Ragna worked hard to give her a strong sense of identity and belonging. They taught her about both human and orc cultures, celebrating the traditions of both peoples. They taught her to read and write in common and to speak the orc language fluently. They taught her to hunt and track and survive in the wilderness, but also to negotiate and mediate and resolve conflicts peacefully. When Alara was 6 years old, Sarah visited their homestead with news. The peace between her settlement and the stone speakers had held, and other nearby settlements were following their example. What had started as a desperate compromise had blossomed into genuine cooperation. Humans and orcs were working together, trading goods and knowledge, building something new. "You two started this," Sarah said, watching as Alara played in the yard. "You proved it was possible, and now look at what we have built." Yates looked at Ragna and she smiled at him. "We just showed people what we already knew. That love is stronger than hate. That understanding is better than fear. That we all have more in common than we have differences. Will you continue to help, to mediate and guide? We need voices like yours." "We will," Ragna said. "As long as we are needed and able, we will help build this peace." As the years passed, the network of settlements and clans that had embraced coexistence grew. It was not universal, and there were still regions where hatred and violence dominated. But in their corner of the world, things were changing. Children grew up playing together regardless of their species. Marriages between humans and orcs, while still rare, were no longer unheard of. Trade flourished, and the combined knowledge of both peoples led to innovations in farming, medicine, and craftsmanship. Yates and Ragna watched these changes with pride and satisfaction. They had not set out to change the world, had only wanted to build a life together, but their example had rippled outward in ways they never anticipated. When Alara was 15, she announced her intention to follow in her parents' footsteps and become a mediator. She had a gift for it, able to see all sides of a conflict and find creative solutions. Yates and Ragna supported her decision, though it meant she would be traveling and facing dangers of her own. "Are you sure?" Yates asked her one evening. "It is not an easy life." "I am sure," Alara replied, her young face set with determination. "You and Mama showed me that making peace is worth any hardship. I want to help more people find what you found. I want to build on what you started." Ragna hugged her daughter tightly. "Then you will make us prouder than we already are. Just promise to be careful and to come home often." "I promise." As Yates watched his daughter prepare for her own journey, he reflected on the path his life had taken. It had started with a foolish card game, a moment of pride that could have led to shame and regret. Instead, it had led him to Ragna, to love, to purpose. He had won her in that game, but the real victory had come when he set her free and she chose to stay. When they chose each other, again and again, despite every obstacle, one evening, many years after that fateful card game, Yates and Ragna sat together on the porch of their homestead. They were older now, their hair touched with gray, their bodies marked by a lifetime of hard work. But their love had only deepened with time. "Do you ever think about that night at the tavern?" Yates asked. "About how differently things could have gone?" "Sometimes," Ragna admitted. "If you had been like Halford, like the others who owned me, my life would have been very different. If you had not set me free, if you had not asked me to stay, I could not have done anything else. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were special. I knew you deserved better than what you had been given. You gave me everything, Yates. You gave me freedom, love, a home, a family. You gave me a future I never thought I could have. You gave me all those things too. You taught me what real courage looks like, what real love is. I am a better man because of you." Ragna leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the hills. In the distance, they could see Alara returning from a trip to the nearby settlement, waving as she spotted them on the porch. "We did good," Ragna said softly. "With our life, with our daughter, with the peace we helped build, we did good." "We did," Yates agreed, "and we are not done yet." She laughed. "No, I suppose we are not." They watched as Alara approached, already calling out news of her successful mediation. Their daughter was radiant with pride and purpose, carrying forward the legacy they had created. The homestead around them was well maintained and prosperous, a testament to years of hard work and love. The forest beyond hummed with life, peaceful and abundant. Yates took Ragna's hand and squeezed gently. She squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was a lifetime of promises kept, of challenges overcome, of love that had conquered every obstacle. He had won her in a card game, set her free, and begged her to stay. She had stayed, not because she owed him anything, but because she chose him just as he had chosen her. And together they had built something beautiful and lasting. A home, a family, a legacy of peace. It was more than he had ever dreamed of that night in the tavern, more than he had dared to hope for. As the stars began to appear overhead, and Alara reached the porch to share her stories, Yates felt a profound gratitude wash over him. For that card game that changed everything. For Ragna's courage and love. For the life they had created together. For every moment, hard and joyful alike, that had brought them to this perfect evening. He looked at Ragna, found her already looking back at him with those beautiful amber eyes, and smiled. They had done more than survive. They had thrived. They had loved. They had made a difference. And they had done it all together exactly as they had promised beneath that oak tree so many years ago. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities and challenges yet to come. But Yates was not afraid. With Ragna by his side, he knew they could face anything. They had already proven that love was stronger than prejudice, that understanding could overcome hatred, that two people from different worlds could create something beautiful together. As they sat on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, Yates knew with absolute certainty that he would not change a single thing. Every struggle, every obstacle, every moment of doubt had been worth it, because it had led him here, to this place, to this woman, to this life. He had won her in a card game. He had set her free. He had begged her to stay. And she had chosen him freely and completely, giving him the greatest gift he had ever received. Her love, her trust, her partnership. Together they had built not just a home, but a legacy. Not just a life, but a future for generations to come. And as the night settled over their valley and the stars wheeled overhead, Yates held Ragna's hand and knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Home. Loved. Complete. Their story had started with a game of cards and a desperate bid for freedom. It had become a story of love conquering prejudice, of courage in the face of adversity, of two souls finding each other across impossible divides. It was a story they would tell their grandchildren someday, a story that would inspire others to look past differences and see the humanity in everyone. But more than anything, it was their story. Unique and precious and wholly theirs. A testament to the power of choice, of kindness, of love that refuses to be bound by the expectations of the world. Yates had won Ragna in a card game, but the real victory had been earning her heart, her trust, her love. And that was a victory he would treasure for the rest of his days.